This is Mwindo, the little one just born, he walked. One of the hardiest and most vibrant of the ancient African epics revolves around the life of the legendary mythical chieftain Mwindo of the Nyanga nation. Mwindo, who exudes a breezy self confidence that easily merges into arrogance, is both a military and a magical phenomenon, capable of raising the dead and vanquishing the most formidable adversaries. That he is not the perfect hero is evident in the fact that he must undergo severe trials that test his moral character and ultimately subject him to the utmost humiliation. Episode 1: The Birth of the Sacred Warrior. A long time ago, in the state of Ihimbi, there lived a king named Shemwindo who ruled the village of Tubando. Shemwindo married 7 women, after which he summoned together a council of all his people. There, in the midst of this assembly of juniors and seniors, advisors, counselors, and nobles, Shemwindo decreed, "You, my wives, must all give birth to girls. Any among you who shall bear a boy, I will kill that child." Then the assembly was dismissed, and Shemwindo hurriedly visited the house of each of his 7 wives, planting his seed into each one as they lay together. After several weeks, it became known to all that Shemwindo's wives got pregnant from the king's first visit to them. Now Shemwindo was famed throughout the country, and the birth of his children was eagerly awaited by the villagers of Tubando. After many months had passed, 6 of Shemwindo's 7 wives gave birth to female children, all on the same day. But Nyamwindo, the 7th wife and preferred one, remained inexplicably pregnant and worried what her long gestation might portend. Then suddenly strange things began to happen. Cut firewood magically appeared at her doorstep. A water jar seemed to fill itself, and raw vegetables turned up on her table. In each case, Nyamwindo felt it was the child still in her womb who was performing these miraculous deeds, but she had no idea how. Meanwhile, the inhabitants of Tubando began to disdain Nyamwindo for failing to deliver her child. But the child dwelling in the womb of the preferred one meditated to itself, "I do not wish to come out of the birth canal of my mother, for then others may not understand that I am no ordinary man." When the pangs of childbirth began, old midwives, wives of the counselors, arrived at Nyamwindo's house, but the child dwelling in her womb climbed up into her belly, then farther up toward her shoulder, descending down to her arm, where it was born through the preferred one's middle finger. Seeing him wailing on the ground, the old midwives were astonished. "What kind of child is this?" they asked. Others asked in a somber tone, Others answered in a somber tone, "It is a male child." Then some of the old midwives said they should announce to the village that a male child was born. Many thought this unwise because Shemwindo would surely kill the baby. Shemwindo, sitting together with his counselors, heard of the preferred one's delivery and demanded to know, "What child is born there?" But the old midwives, sitting in the house with the child, kept silent. They gave him the name Mwindo because he was the first child born who followed only female children in order of birth. Mwindo was born laughing, speaking, and walking, holding a conga scepter in his right hand and an axe in his left. He was born wearing a little bag of the spirit of Kahindo, the goddess of good fortune, slung across the left side of his back, and in that little bag there was a long rope. In the house where the child was born, there was a little cricket perched on the wall. When the cricket heard that the midwives were unwilling to give Shemwindo an answer, it went to Shemwindo and said, "A male child was born to the preferred one today. His name is Mwindo. That is why no one has answered you." Shemwindo was enraged upon hearing the news. He sharpened his spear on a whetstone and immediately left for the birth hut. But the moment he prepared to throw the spear into the hut, the child shouted from within, "Each time you throw a spear, may it end up at the bottom of the house pole. May it never reach me, these old midwives, or my mother." Shemwindo threw the spear into the house 6 times, and each time it fell short of its mark, failing to kill Mwindo. Shemwindo became exhausted and told his counselors they should dig a grave and throw Mwindo into it. The counselors dug the grave, then went to fetch the child. But after being placed in the grave, Mwindo howled, saying, "Oh, my father, this is the death that you will die, but first you will suffer many sorrows." Shemwindo heard the sound of the little castaway and scolded his people, telling them to cover the grave immediately. Fallen plantain stems were fetched and placed over Mwindo. On top of these stems, mounds of soil were heaped. Yet as evening fell, a light as bright as the sun shone from Mewindo's grave. Those still sitting outdoors rushed to tell Shemwindo's counselors what they beheld. The counselors returned, but the great heat, like a fire burning from where Mwindo lay, forced them to stand back. Throughout the night, they took turns keeping a vigil over the child's grave. During the first watch, when the rest of Tubando was already asleep, Mwindo got out of his grave and crept silently into the house of his mother. Shemwindo, who was awakened by the sound of a child wailing in the house of the preferred one, crept to her hut and questioned his wife. "Where does this child come from? Did you have another one in your womb?" "No," she replied. "This child is Mwindo." Shemwindo left at once to wake up his counselors. "Tomorrow," he ordered, "you will cut a piece from the trunk of a tree. You will carve from it the body of a drum. You will then put the skin of an antelope in the river to soften for the drum head. You will place this miracle child Mwindo in the drum and seal it tightly." When dawn came, the counselors went to the forest to cut a piece of wood for the shell of the drum. They hollowed the wood, and when they had finished, they went to fetch Mwindo once more. They stuck him into the body of the drum and glued the antelope hide on top. Shemwindo then summoned 2 expert divers to throw this drum into the pool where nothing moves, as the entire village looked on. The swimmers entered the pool, and in the middle they released the drum, which quickly sank into the watery depths. Mwindo moaned inside the drum, stuck his ear to the drumhead, listened attentively, and said resolutely to himself, "I would not be Mwindo if I simply floated. My father and the others, they will hear the sound of my voice again." And with those words, the drum arose unassisted from the sandy river bottom and floated to the surface of the water, remaining fixed at one point in the middle of the pool where nothing moves. When a group of maidens came to draw water from the river, they saw Mewindo's drum turning round and round in the middle of the pool, and they heard him singing of his father's perfidy. They, the frightened women scurried up the river bank and ran back to the village. When news of the sighting reached Shemwindo, he too was in disbelief. He again assembled all his people, who headed for the river armed with spears, arrows, and fire torches. Mwindo waited until the residents of Tubando had gathered along the river's edge. Then he threw sweet words of song into his mouth. "I am saying farewell to Shemwindo. O you ungrateful people, do you think I shall die?" The counselors abandoned Shemwindo. He who appears to die but actually will be safe. He is going to encounter Iangura.